16 months ago, I was completely clueless to the world of entrepreneurship in one of the biggest ruts of my life, and halfway through a trip to Spain, that was just me escaping the reality that I was living in the UK. But fast forward to now, I run a successful online mindset coaching business and helping founders make their impact that they want to make by connecting their vision to their execution and their impact, just working wholly on their mindset. And there's been 20 different mindset shifts that I've had to go through that has impacted me and my clients wholeheartedly. And in the past 60 days alone, me and my clients have collected just about 100K in cash, that's USD, and I've been loving every part of the journey, but it would not have been possible without each and every one of these mindset shifts that I'm about to go into. Now, it may be very obvious that a lot of gurus online bang on about mindset, but in reality, just one of these mindset shifts that you can see and you can break down in this video will solve a huge bottleneck within your business, and I can guarantee that if you focus on mindset. And I believe me and my clients are walking testaments to that, and I'm very excited to dive in. But for the next 30 minutes, I would appreciate you diving deep into your own mindset, and I cannot wait to get stuck in. First of all, the first mindset shift that I had to undertake in order to get where I am today, which started off my entire journey on that exact same Spain trip in June of 2024, was that you are both your strongest enemy and your greatest asset. There is not one part of me during that trip that wasn't beating myself up because I had this to-do list on an app called TickTick, and there was a completed task list and there was an uncompleted task list on either one of those tabs highlighted in red. And every time that I would look at my task list, I would start using that as an excuse to beat myself up over what I had not achieved yet. And I was in uni at the time. I was doing uni work whilst I was abroad, and I was honestly hating it because I was just going from the end of second year, into second year. And at that point, I was just trying to find a vehicle, something else that would really let me escape from where I wanted to go. And I had no idea what the world of entrepreneurship had to offer until I went to this techno rave, and I pulled up my to-do list and I thought, oh fuck, that looks like a lot of red right there. I put it in my pocket. I headed in with some friends that I met at the time from one of the hostels I was staying at, and I met this guy. I'll call him Dan for now because I won't disclose his real name, but I put my story about this guy up before and I will say it again. This guy changed my entire life because he introduced me to a world where I didn't have to beat myself up. I didn't have to be my own worst enemy. And for you specifically, if you're in your own way, which a lot of entrepreneurs are, you will find time and time again that you find the excuse to beat yourself up of what you have not achieved yet, rather than what you have achieved. And I sat down on the beach after this, after a 5-hour conversation whilst the sun was coming up, and it really hit me just how amazing it was to have a second perspective and to have that he told me that you don't really have to be beating yourself up. Why are you doing that? Why are you not focusing on what you have done? And in the same conversation, he told me to quit my job, essentially. He introduced me to Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Quadrant Flow. Anything on those lines was so new to me at the time, but it allowed me to gain the perspective that I was no longer my worst enemy, but I was my strongest asset. I'm the only person who can move the needle further enough to actually achieve what I wanted to do. And after that trip, I went back home and I quit my job and I did all of this, which I'm excited to get into later because that's also a big mindset shift that I had to go through in order to actually take the leap and risks. But for him, for Dan, he really helped me out, and I think that it really comes down, which is my second mindset shift that I had to understand, is that all it takes is a second perspective. All it takes is a second lens, and I had no idea that someone else could give me more clarity than I ever could to myself. I was in my own world, and that task list, I had it all figured out in my head, but I had absolutely nothing figured out on how to handle the workload, how to actually appreciate myself, be kind to myself. And for that second bit of kindness that I got from Dan, it really showed me that a second perspective, a second lens, especially as an entrepreneur, is exactly what you need to keep moving forward at every single level. I have distinct memories from that chat that allow me to gain the most amount of clarity that I had ever got in any relationship whatsoever. And it was this guy doing 7 figures in consulting that really allowed me to understand that someone else who has done what I want to do in parallels is going to help me more than I ever could. And that's extremely important to notice for the rest of the video as well, because a second perspective in your business is more important than your own. You need to be constantly searching for the people who have done the thing and take their perspectives and take action. That's what Dan taught me, and I think the main thing that I got from a second lens at that exact moment in Spain in June 2024 is that I didn't have to be living this life. I didn't have to be working in a restaurant and going to uni and doing all of this stuff. I was the person who determined where I would go in life, and that second perspective was the only thing that unlocked that for me. Genuinely one of the biggest mindset shifts that I think I've ever gone through. And even just reading the books that you recommended was enough for me to be like, okay, there is an entirely different world out there for me to be able to access, and this person's just allowed me to take that perspective and put it into action. The third mindset shift that I had to go through, when I went back home and I was at my job, I was working in a restaurant called Five Guys, and I was getting burns on my arms every week. The same fryers that I was shaking baskets on, I was getting burns all over my arms. I was speaking to people making minimum wage, putting in the minimum effort, and I was so done with it. At that point, I knew I had to do something. I had to act at some point. But when I looked at my Instagram feed and I scrolled onto a random video, there was this, I got essentially funneled into an entrepreneurial community, which would be a big part of my story as well. But this entrepreneurial community, I hopped on call on my lunch break after, probably shaving some burn cream on my arms just to spite the pain. I went on my lunch break and I sat at the office desk and I hopped on call with this guy. I'll call him Callum because I'm sure he doesn't mind mentioning his name. But Callum allowed me to get a perspective as well. Same with mindset shift number 2, that to conquer the island, you have to burn the boats. You don't have to have a plan B in order to succeed. You have to fully take the risk, and you have to take enormous risk. Burning the boats just means that when you arrive at the island, you have to conquer, you have to fight. You're in this survival mode, but you cannot do that without burning your plan B. You have to take enormous amounts of risk in order to actually see the reward. But that in the form of me quitting my job on my lunch break, draining my bank account from £500 at the time down to zero to invest in this entrepreneurial community. And I had to get out of that job. I was literally so done with working in that job, and I knew there was a vehicle somewhere. I knew I had a second perspective telling me that I can do it, and I knew that I was no longer beating myself up and putting myself in a corner. I had the opportunity, and so I took it. And I took that risk with enormous gravity, and I think that is the main part that you should be taking on about this. If it doesn't feel like an enormous risk to you, if it feels like you can probably get by with taking this decision and you can calculate it and it'll be all good, you shouldn't go for it. It should be the most enormous risk that you can take, because it will build your muscle from the very get-go of your mission and your journey, that you will be able to take the most amount of risk possible. And that alone, my friends, is valuable enough for you to be able to shift your mindset to that of someone who earns millions, who earns billions, because everyone at the top and everyone that I know who is extremely wealthy takes enormous risks. And that's the first thing that I went through as soon as I took the leap and I took action, was I was taking enormous risk. That is by far the most valuable thing that I think could have started off my journey. And once I had taken that enormous risk, well, what did I have to do? I had to go through a season of taking such fast action. I had to move. Number 4, the mindset shift that I had to undertake was that I had to move incredibly quickly. And I realized this as I got quicker into my journey. It was August 2024 at this point. I had signed up to the network and I realized I'd quit my job. I had a lot more time to my hands, but I had to take that time and 10x it. I had to get very quickly into the mix, and within a week I got an appointment setting role. Of a week of joining that network, originally I wanted to do music as my Instagram profile and start posting content, but that would not happen until March of 2025. But August of 2024 led me into sales, the Lion's Den. The amount of energy that I had during that time allowed me to move so quickly and helped me learn that if you're not moving quickly in this space, you are losing enormous amounts of time. And you could not do that in a previous 9-to-5 job or a previous conventional job where I'd be working in a restaurant and I would be getting paid for my time, but I would not be able to move quicker than my own job would allow me to. But this is a different role. This is a different part of the puzzle where you need to be pushing those pieces into the puzzle at rapid speed. Otherwise, you are competing with people who are the Flash, who are currently in a race that is running faster than you. And to be honest, I was drowning in my first 2 months. I had to really learn the hard way. Whilst I was dialing $200 a day, I was working with restaurants in America, the only thing that I knew, and I was trying to get them to hop on a call with people. And it was very difficult to actually get into it. But once I start gaining the notion of speed, that is when I made my first closes. That's when essentially I wasn't making any money, to be honest with you, when I was dialing. Actually, I'll get into that in a second as well on my journey with sales. But that was the only thing that actually made me progress, was working with speed. It was all numbers, it was all dials, it was all DMs, but that only was fueled by the speed that I was putting in. I think for you, if you have speed, you are commoditizing the resource of growth, which means that the more speed you take on, the more things that you act on quicker, you will start to build the resource of growth, and you'll be able to see that within your business compounding. The inputs that you put in quickly will then start to show. And I think that was the main mindset shift that I had to go through, was that if you're not working with speed, you are throwing a lot out of the table and into the bin. But number 5 was what you insist on keeping around you will start to drain your energy. And that comes in the form of, I have my list here, habits, distractions, bad influences, and vices. I was a uni student at the time, and I can tell you for a fact there were a lot of distractions. As you can imagine, first year of uni, going into second, I was this guy just fresh out of first year, having a great time in freshers the previous year, but as an entrepreneur now, I had to understand that what was around me and what was surrounding me was essentially putting me into a space of all of my good habits, all of my bad habits were sort of fighting hand in hand, and trying to get the best outcome was very difficult without taking into consideration that everything around me was now affecting me very heavily compared to my previous role. Now, September to October 31st, I was pretty much in the trenches, and I came face to face with everything that you can think of when it comes to parties, when it comes to people around me telling me to go out on Friday nights. And this is more applicable to the entrepreneurial side of things, where you have shiny objects absolutely everywhere. You have bad vices that you may not be aware of, but everything that you do, you need to sacrifice a lot of those things. You need to take into consideration that what you have around you will make you the person who you are tomorrow. And anything outside of that you don't think will align with you long term, you need to get rid of. And that's the hard lesson that I had to learn. I lost relationships, I lost jobs, I lost people, because they just dropped off my frequency when I started to understand that what I kept around me was what was making me who I was tomorrow. And that is extremely important. All of these mindset shifts that I've gone through are all going to be in the realm of the self-development space, of the entrepreneurial space, understanding exactly the 1% improvements that you need to make. These mindset shifts won't just do 1%. They will do 20 to 50%. I can guarantee you, if you're implementing at least one of these so far, we're already on number 7, but all of these mindset shifts have genuinely made me who I am today. And even just having your environment taken into consideration, your bad habits, everything in the realm of self-development is one-to-one with entrepreneurship. And I teach my clients this. They know that if it's just the 1% improvements, it's because they haven't built the good habits, they haven't built the systems, they haven't built the sacrifice level that they need to be at in order to succeed. Now, number 8. You must sacrifice what does not serve you. And this was a big point in my journey. This was around November, December. I was getting to the point where I was dating someone at that point, and I was working very hard. I was trying to get my dials and DMs up, and DM setting was a big part of my journey whilst I was in the network. I started working for BTB, which was the network that I joined at the very start, and at this point, my partner was starting to get very, very, I would say, sentimental. And at this time, my partner was actually starting to comment on my work and start to, be a very big part of my life, but also a very big drain in my life. And I didn't quite see that. I felt like there was a perspective that I needed, similar to number 2, where I didn't have clarity on why I was with this person. And essentially, after a long while, I got to the point where one half of knowing what you want is knowing what you must give up before you get it. And I got to the point in December, it was like I had this huge vision for the next year and the 5 years following that. And I thought, does this person align with my vision? I sat down with myself, I journaled. There's a picture that's probably I'm going to put up on screen of me sat smiling at the camera, but in my bed a bit sad, sorry for myself, and journaling my thoughts, sat there thinking, does this person actually align with who I want to be? And the answer was no. And I had to take that into consideration, that one half of knowing what I wanted was to know that I had to let go of that person. And as sorry as it is, I'm so glad that I did. Because as entrepreneurs, we need to understand that the person that we keep closest by us is the person that has to either stay, show that they are part of our journey, or leave. And at that point, sales was very important to me. My career was so important to me. My journey, taking my considerations aside, it still had this impact on me that I thought I needed to have someone else by my side. And if they weren't the right person, that person had to be sacrificed, not physically, of course, but they had to be let go. And I think that's so important for us to understand. If you are in this journey for the long game, you have to be not critical, but you have to be so critical with yourself and who you keep around, and sacrifice what does not serve you. And you've probably heard that before, but for someone who's gone through that myself and who's helped my clients with that as well, I think it's so important to understand, and I'm very happy to have it at the number 10 spot because it is just one of the more important. It's actually the number 8 spot. I'm very happy to have it at the number 8 spot. But it is one of the more important things because to go from dating someone and putting aside your career for something like that, every person who's watching this video must consider that. Whether or not you're dating or you are, as an entrepreneur, you have to understand that what you keep around you, you must at least sacrifice what does not serve you within that. Number 9 is nothing is separating you from the people that you look up to. They just got enough skin in the game to notice and learn something earlier than you did. And that's one of the quotes that I have been banging on about and I love talking about. So if I get on about this, then that's exactly why. But after a very long time, I just had this itch to put myself out there. And this is from December to March. At this point, I was posting basically little stories on my Instagram about, you know, content and wanting to do content. I was hopping on so many calls about content, and I had this itch that I wanted to put myself out there. But the one thing that was really stopping me was like, I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not the business owner. I'm not the guy who makes content. I'm not the guy who can put himself out there and see success. And that was the subconscious subliminal thing that was running through my head. I didn't believe I was a business owner. I was just a setter, right? I was just this guy who made money online and he sat sending DMs all day. And then he went home and he spoke to his uni flatmates and he didn't even post one video on the internet. And that wasn't me. But until I realized there was nothing separating me from a completely new identity, from the people who have actually taken the leap, that is when it finally happened. In March, I posted my first video, and it was of that same Spain story that I spoke about at the very start of this YouTube video. I could not have been more proud of that moment because I finally stepped into something that was no longer separating me from the people that I look up to. It was Iman Gadzhi, it was Alex Hormozi, it was Chris Williamson, it was all of these people that had posted themselves and they seemed like they were way above my level, which they are physically. But when it comes down to the mark, nothing is separating you from the people you look up to. They only got more skin in the game to realize something sooner than you did. And for me, that was that when you post your content, you step into something. You post a video and you step into a new identity and a new momentum that will take you further than you ever thought was possible. I'm sat on a beach here in Bali and I never thought I would have got here. I was sending DMs out with the same videos that we would send videos of our trips to Bali and everything to try and sell someone into a program. And I can tell you for a fact, I didn't even think twice. I thought, oh, I'm just a setter, I could never do that. And the moment that I stepped into that new identity that was no longer separating me from anyone else that I looked up to, that is when it happened. And I think that mindset shift was so key to be able to get me exactly where I am now. And to everyone else that is watching and to everyone that I've helped, it's been the backbone to be able to action the next level. Is that you are no longer separated from anyone that you look up to. The next level is within your reach. You just have to be willing to understand that skin in the game, plus realizing something that they have realized already. They just did it sooner than you. Number 11, actually number 10, stretching yourself thin will only start to make it easier for holes to start showing. And at the time, this was about March till May. I was running my setting. I had a second job that I took on to get some more income in, as you do as a uni student. I had university, I had my content that I was posting, and at that time I thought I was taking steps to fuel my future, to be able to actually take a step back, to be able to strategize my new career. And me posting content, me doing uni work, me setting, I thought it was the perfect combination to actually get where I wanted to go. But really, that only started to make a plethora of bad habits that were on my plate. A plethora of things on my plate was the bad habit. And I was sat there thinking, if I stack enough things on my skill set, then that will allow me to get exactly where I want to go. But really, I just took on another cold calling role. I carried that all the way into April. And essentially, I was just trying to stack as much things as possible. That cold calling role I left after a couple of days. I won't say the names of who that was, but that was really funny to add in the journey there. But I got to about April before I realized that taking things off my plate is my only 10x move. And that mindset shift really hit me because I spent the last 2 years stacking things on my plate, whether it was going into a band, whether it was running a club, whether it was being the vice president of the Calisthenics Society. I was so multifaceted and I thought that was so cool. But as an entrepreneur, you have to be focusing on one thing solely. And stacking things on the plate and understanding that if you have a lot of things on your plate, they'll start to crack. There'll start to be cracks in that plate, the dough will start to stretch and you'll start to see holes, which ironically I was working a pizza job at the time, spinning the dough ball and it was literally that exact same thought that I'm stretching myself thin right now, but I feel all right. It was all right, it was a great time, but to be honest, that mindset shift by removing stuff on my plate really helped me because I immediately got my first demo client when I went and I focused on everything. I actually quit my appointment setting role. I got fired from that job, which was a month later. I left that cold calling role and I started to wean off the actual appointment setting. And I think the main part of that was that when I took things off my plate, it allowed me to commit to the content. It allowed me to commit with a certain runway, which wasn't much whatsoever, to commit to something. And there was no longer holes in my processes. There was no longer holes in my thoughts in my brain. I wasn't no longer stretched energy-wise. I was able to put my energy into one thing and I immediately got returns from it. I immediately got a demo client, which fueled the rest of my business. Now, this is the most exciting time of my life because I was focusing on number 11. The people who surround you today will make who you are tomorrow. And the people that I was with at the time was me back home for the month of April, just while I just got that new job and I was still working through that stretching thin mindset shift. I decided that the people around me weren't quite up to par. And that sounds really egotistical, to be honest, but I was currently a year into my journey and I'd been through uni and everything and I understood my people a little bit better. And when I got back home, it was the same hometown friends that reminded me that the people I was surrounded by was going to make up who I was tomorrow. So I took a trip to Wales and I was becoming very focused on the people that I had around me, but Wales gave me the understanding that the people that you have around you are going to make your life so much easier. Just like that is when it can change, when you understand that the people you have around you are going to impact you so much. Immediately when I went on that trip, it was the guys from that same network I joined back in July. I had this realization that I have so much energy, it feels so much less friction to this process than it would if I was sat at home in my room messaging clients, cold calling, doing whatever it took to get more clients in. But the moment I stepped into that environment, the people who had that understanding as well, they knew that the people they had around them were going to 10x their business. And guess what happened? I signed 3 new demo clients and I understood that my offer building was going to start fucking skyrocketing. And everything that I was doing at that point to solve my bottleneck, which was offer and it was content, started to really pick up. There was a genuine, the rising tide will raise all ships mentality, and I think the people you keep around you, if you're not already evaluating them, which sounds, again, egotistical, but the more that you evaluate who you have around you, the more that you'll realize who you are tomorrow. Because you'll start to see patterns in the people who've got sucked into lifestyle, who haven't understood exactly what their vision is and aren't taking action, who are sat in the same spot they were 2 weeks ago. Those are the types of people that will make up who you are tomorrow. And as an entrepreneur, I can tell you for a fact, you probably don't want that. That was a huge mindset shift and it even got me some more clients. So well worth putting into practice the fact that you have people around you who are impacting you more than you know. Number 12, you have to be willing to commit or lose it all. This was the point in between me quitting all of those jobs and also dropping out of university. I had a point in my journey where in April and May, I thought I had everything built. I had everything sorted out, similar to mindset shift number 8. There was a lot in my mind that I thought I had everything figured out. But then in May, just after my birthday, I think it was May 18th, I got fired from that pizza job. And for those of you watching, you're like, great, it's great. But to me, that kind of hurt. At first, at least for the first week, I was sat there in quite a strut, to be honest. It wasn't the best, but that really hit me in a way that shifted my mindset more than anything. It was that I had to be willing to lose it. I had to go through that week and be in pain to realize that if I lose something, I had to be willing to lose it in the first place. Because otherwise it's going to attach you to the outcome so much that I would have never recovered from that. And at that point, I decided that if I had to be willing to lose it all, then I dropped out of uni. I also lost that job, but really to the extent that I knew I had to be willing to cut down everything. If there were to be that place that I was sat there willing to lose it all before I had lost it, then I had to commit to that. And I had to really understand, which is number 13 as well, that if I notice a pattern, that I have to double down on it. When it came to quitting my setting role, losing that job, quitting that other cold calling role, getting into the point where I was fully running my business and I was fully committed, I was running my content, I had to be willing to lose all of that as well. But I decided to take leaps at that point. I decided to understand that if I wanted to do something, I had to go all in. I had to put my full focus on it. So I booked flights to Bali, started selling all of my possessions, and it really showed me that that commitment allowed me to actually action the life that I have now. And it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't willing to lose it in the first place. And for you watching, who is most likely also going through that commitment phase, I can tell you, if you delay alignment, you will start to drift off course further than you ever thought was possible. So now is the time to commit, and you have to be willing to lose it all. And that mentality, that lose it all mentality, is actually what will push you to be able to make the commitment, because it will feel painful, it will feel scary, it will feel exciting as well. And those are the two emotions you need to be following, and you need to commit to it. That is what the pattern I noticed was. And if you notice a pattern, for number 13, you have to double down. For one whole year, I had come full circle at this point. I had understood the pattern behind the journey that I had gone through. What you go through now and what has gotten you to this point will not get you to where you need to go next. But if you notice a pattern within that, you must elevate it. You must double down on it. And that came in the form of being fully in on the business. I had invested into that community that got me there. And at this point, it went from April to May to June. And I knew at that point, around 3 months prior to that, that I had to invest with the pattern that had got me to where I am now. I had to invest in someone. So I invested in a mentor for my coaching business, for my offer, to understand how to properly run my content and position myself as the authority in my business. I had to go through the mindset shift over that 3-month period where I needed to drop my ego. I had to understand the patterns, I had to understand the data that I had, and understand that there's someone else there with the number 2 perspective that I needed that allowed me to reach the next level. So I invested once more. It was around 6.5K US, no, 6.5K pounds for that reason, which I invested into myself. And I can tell you for a fact that it all comes back to number 2. All it takes is a second perspective. And I knew that pattern. I knew that I had to double down on that. And for you, you can sign a high ticket client within a month, exactly how I did when I doubled down. I went to a mastermind in London after I'd invested, and I thought, let's just try my luck. Let's see what traffic source I can source from this. And I led with value. And I had that pattern as well in the back of my mind. When I got those demo clients, I was leading with value. And I arrived at this mastermind. I helped one person with one particular complex problem, and it signed me a client a week later. I would say for a fact that if you find a pattern, double downing is the only way to really access the vertical that you've been looking for, to actually understand which pattern is going to make you succeed. And that mindset shift literally changed my entire trajectory. When I signed that client, I was on my way to success. And number 14 is there is an abundance of opportunities out there, but all it takes is one. And that was the exact thing that was going through my head when I signed that client at that mastermind. And that happened to be the inflection point between me in a scarcity mindset and in an abundance mindset. There are an abundance of opportunities out there, but all it takes is one. And the method to the madness in that is you have to be so abundant, and you have to be accessing the abundance cycle each and every day. You have to understand that there is an abundance of everything. There's money that grows on trees. There is leads that come out of funnels that you are not tapping into yet because you are not tapping into the brain that allows you to understand the abundance mindset. And within that, there is only one that you need in order to actually understand that. And once you have that first one, abundance comes so easily. And I can say that for a fact because I've been through the exact same thing, and I've helped my clients exactly to that vertical. The abundance mindset is what has gotten me so far. I wouldn't have had that abundance if it wasn't for every difficult part of my journey that only had one impact. And it had that one-to-one direct impact on my life and my business that allowed me to realize that abundance is the key to accessing every vertical you've been looking for. It had a huge shift into what was possible, and before I wasn't clear on exactly what I needed to do to sign a client, and after that I didn't really care what the how was. I understood there was an abundance of hows out there to how I was going to get a client in the first place. Now, this is a very controversial take which a lot of people might disagree with unless they've been through the exact same thing that I have. And it's that a location cannot give you what you do not already possess. And I had a massive run-in with this when it came to arriving in Bali, taking that flight, 5 flights to be exact, to get here to this beautiful beach. I thought this was going to be the game changer. This was going to 10x my business. In reality, it 3x'd it, but I would not have had that 3x return if it wasn't for what I had built prior and what I built whilst I was here. Because the only thing that Bali actually gave me was perspective, that nothing else here could give me what I needed. a huge part of Bali is that everyone thinks it's this magical place that once you get here, you're locked in, you're grinding on your vision, you're networking with these amazing entrepreneurs, and you're getting to exactly where you want to go because you're surrounded by the right people and all this. No. The main thing you're surrounded with 68% of the time is you, and you can only give you the things that you will eventually use to succeed. And I had to go through that completely, back to number 7, exactly where I was at that point. I was just thinking that if I just stay in Bali, I'll have an amazing time, and my business will 10x at that point. It magically changed absolutely nothing. I got to this point where I was pretty scarce in my mindset, and I had no idea why, until I realized it was my doing that allowed me to go into that space. And despite what everyone else said before they got out to Bali and what was telling me exactly what Bali was going to be like, I had to find out for myself that Bali's not a magical place. Nowhere is a magical place. You are the magic that you've been looking for. And I think that is so important to realize if you actually want to access that vertical. And when I did access that vertical, I fucking did it. Right? I signed my second high ticket client when I just got out of that state that Bali's this magical place, and I just sat down and worked. I led with value. I noticed the pattern. I doubled down on it, and I found my second high ticket client. I signed them, and at that point I was accessing a vertical that I had no idea was possible until I realized I was the magic. There was nothing about Bali that was able to impact my journey more than me. Number 16 is you are only as strong as your weakest link. And this is AKA known as bottleneck focus. You have a chain within your business that allows you to understand that your marketing, sales, fulfillment, delivery, but one of those things is your weakest link. And I had a huge realization when I had that fresh new second high ticket client that I needed to evolve. But I had no idea what vertical to evolve in. I didn't know where to focus because, to be honest, it was pretty exciting. And I had solved this bottleneck before we hopped on the sales call with the prospect that I signed. I'd solved their bottleneck, but I couldn't clock for some reason the fact that I had to focus on my bottlenecks 100% of the time. I had to have this insane bottleneck focus that everything else that I was working on, if it wasn't the bottleneck, if it wasn't the weakest link that I was strengthening, it was all just noise. And that is a huge thing that I want to really emphasize on this, because my client, the second one that I signed, had 2 20K months following that discovery. The fact that we focused on his bottleneck and allowed me to focus on my bottleneck with my business sort of collided paths with this amazing record month twice in a row. He's currently sat at, for his third month, 25.9K cash for anyone wondering on that front. But when you're accessing that vertical, you literally have to understand that 99% of everything is noise, and the 1% that you need to focus on is your bottleneck, it's your weakest link, and it can bring amazing returns. Because literally anyone that will tell you to focus on something else within your business, and someone will tell you, why don't you do this? Which happens a lot of the time the more you get up in the ladder in terms of progress with your business. A lot of people will have voices, and you need to understand those voices are probably going to be noise. Unless someone has your true best interest, they've looked at your business intently and they understand your bottlenecks better than you do, they have that number 2 second perspective that you need, you have to be able to evaluate that noise and understand it's probably going to be 99% bullshit. You have the understanding that your bottleneck is going to help you 10x your business. You can move so much quicker when you realize that, oh, my marketing is really hindering my sales, but I could improve my offer here. It doesn't work like that, and especially with Moksh, which is my second high ticket client, the one that we helped get to those 2 20K months, and now at a third 25K month, we have just spent the last 3 months focusing on his bottleneck. First, it was the sales mindset, pressing on pain. Second, it was hiring and not knowing who to hire. I literally went through that very quickly with him. We understood exactly this is the vertical we need to take, and this is how we get there. This is our only bottleneck. Fuck everything else. Second 20K month, and then when it came to reinvesting in himself and getting that side of things sorted, we also had to understand that ads is our bottleneck. We need to learn so much about ads, and we need to focus on story sequences and pushing out our marketing more than ever. And that was when we have reached, we're not even halfway done, it's currently October 20th, and that is where we're at. And for those watching live, you're about to see this man hit 50 to 100K months, and you are simply not ready for it. But I know I am, because we're focusing on the bottleneck. That was a extremely important one for number 16. But for number 17, this is one of my hardest lessons. As an entrepreneur, I started to embody from year one that I was a perfectionist, and I had no idea why, but it started to be a unique trait of mine that would start to eat me completely, because perfection is paralysis. I want you to remember that for so many reasons, because once you have a state of perfection and you're trying to perfect every state of your business, every process you make, every video, every DM script, every VSL, you're trying to perfect it. But in reality, no one is trying to push out perfect content, but they think that it's perfect. Nothing that what you perceive is perfect, but what it will do for you, it will put you in a state of paralysis, scarcity, the type of mental state that makes you sit at your desk wondering if you're going to fall off and if you're going to have to go home, you have to sell a bunch of your equity off to some business partner. Instead of bootlegging your entire business, you're now going to have to start losing all of your assets, and that starts to put you in that paralysis and that scarcity mode, because you're starting to think perfectly. You're starting to think, I need to make this perfect, otherwise this won't work. And that is simply not true. I had to go through that. I just bought the camera that I'm filming on now. I tried to make the perfect content rollout for the month, and I was sat there with my mentor at this random restaurant in Bali, and I was trying to think of every perfect individual 1% point that I could do in order to make my business take off. And the moment that I stopped thinking about perfect action, and the moment I was not in that perfect inaction stage, and I started to drift into as much perfect inaction, much perfect action as I could, that is when I first hit my 100K video. The one that you see on my page, probably pinned at the time of recording this, is the one that I thought, let's just release this. It's some social proof. Maybe it'll work, maybe it doesn't. I don't care. My editor's going to make me maybe 2 revisions on this one, and I'm going to push it out. And that is exactly when the vertical was accessed, because I started to take more action, and that muscle was built up until the point that I posted that video. And from being frustrated with my editors, building a perfect mastermind plan that I was hosting at the time, to then hosting that mastermind with a half-written script, to posting that video no matter the amount of revisions that I was going to do on it, it was just imperfect action and getting out of the perfection and paralysis cycle that I had been in for the past year. This is something that has impacted me for so long, and now I'm helping my clients understand that vertical more than I ever could a year ago. And that is such an honor, because if you can take imperfect action long enough, you'll see all the millionaires that you know and you watch on YouTube as well. Those guys take enormous amounts of imperfect action, and for you, that is a liberating feeling that you cannot let slip. And in that same month after that video, I made 10K in that same month, after making pretty much net 1K, which wasn't really great in my eyes, and it still isn't to this day. But it all came from getting out of the perfection paralysis cycle. Such an important mindset shift. I would say that is one of my favorites that I've come across in the past few months, and I definitely think that it's going to be useful to you. So if you're in that state where you think you need to make this video the best it possibly can be before you push it out, you need to make your team fully aware of the SOPs before you hop on the Zoom call, you need to take an enormous amount of imperfect action, and that will start to compound. Instead of a 100% effort, it's going to turn into 240% effort, because you spent 3 videos doing 80%. And that is exactly where you need to be, because otherwise you'll be 100% paralyzed rather than 240% in motion, which is exactly where you need to be focusing on. Speaking of focus, number 18 is soul focus will be what separates the distracted from the devoted. And I love this quote because I just wrote it on my Notion. I got a bit giddy about it, but you have to be pretty high on the idea of soul focus. Otherwise, you'll start to get distracted. All the shiny objects, all the people telling you need to be focusing on anything else but your bottleneck will be wrong for good reason. Because I was stood in a cushy Bali villa with my swimming trunks. I'll maybe pop up a B-roll clip of that as well. But I was talking to my mentor, and I got a huge slap in the face reminder that I needed to be back onto my soul focus. I was preaching a lot about it at the time, and I was not practicing, and I was sat in that space where I was focusing on everything else across the board rather than one thing entirely. I was letting my distractions get to me. I was letting an enormous amount of anti-focus start to seep into my processes. The opposite of focus is the abundance of distractions. And for that reason alone, I was sat in this space where everyone else around me was making content, was doing all this stuff, and they were talking to me like, oh, why are you working so much? That was 5 minutes after the call I had with my mentor to remind me that soul focus is the only thing that is going to make me devoted to my mission, and anything else was being extremely abhorrent with the fact that I was ignoring my vision. If I wasn't being solely focused on that, And I started removing as many distractions as I could. I was focusing on one thing in particular, and at the time that was just posting content and just sending DMs. Those two things were my sole focus, and I could not have had a better result from that, because after I built awareness of them and avoiding draining that devotion, not listening to any of those people who are going to be sucked into that lifestyle, who haven't built the business at this point, and they won't in 5 years' time if they don't have soul focus, I started to really see returns in my habits and returns in my mental and returns of actual clients showing up on calls and being like, "You look great today, mate." And I was thinking, I looked so fucking out of pocket at that point. I was sat there at my desk trying to do 3 things at once, like taking client calls 1 minute and then going to a beach club in Bali another minute, and I was sat with my mates at the time thinking, this is great. And then I got back after that trip and I thought, this is a distraction. And that sole focus had to be implanted into my brain if I wanted to actually succeed. And I saw immediate returns from taking that sole focus into consideration. And I know you will as well. Sole focus will make you devoted. Anything other than that will make you distracted. And for number 19, I will say that number 18, the one preceding it, sole focus, is going to make you a lot of money. If you can understand the fundamentals behind focus, which I'm going to be making a video later this week on, if you'd like to see that, please comment down below. And I can tell you for a fact that if you do not focus on anything in particular and you let the distractions seep in, you will start to see your business drained and distracted, and you will start to lose those record months that you've been gunning for. And I don't think anyone else watching this wants to see that happen. Number 19, you cannot rely on outputs. You cannot be attached to the outputs, the goals and the vision that you really have built out in your brain. You cannot be attached to that. You can only fall to the level of your systems. You cannot be in a state where you're focusing on the outputs. Because in particular for me, I was task switching so much because of those distractions in number 18. And I had such a focus on I needed to be doing everything and that I needed to be hitting these goals in particular. By the end of Q4, I want this, this, and this, and you cannot let your work ride on those outputs. This is a huge meditation topic that I had to really focus on when I was in that state. And I think when I was attached to the outputs, I was so emotionally all over the place. And when I was just focused on the inputs and I allowed my systems to allow those to be enacted, that is exactly when things start to shift. I had a huge mental positive mood and I had the vision and output laid out, but I only cared about the inputs that were laid out in themselves. I focused on the inputs. I focused on the fact that if I focused purely on working at my desk for however long it took per day and just doing the inputs rather than writing on my vision board what goal I wanted to hit next. In the year prior, in December, I had a huge goal board of every output that I wanted, and it kept me stuck for so long. And when I realized it was literally just the inputs, it was simple as sitting at my desk and saying, I'm going to do this today, I'm going to do this today, and that is going to input and get me to where I want to be later. And I won't see that for a long time, of course, delayed gratification. But that was just full trust in those inputs that really shifted my mindset and allowed me to realize that it's no longer the goals that I'm fighting for. I couldn't really care less about those. I know I'm going to surpass them as long as I have my systems riding on my inputs. And that was it. There was no output, there was no goal that was going to make my business go way above the water when it comes to progress. I had to understand that it was solely my inputs, and I could only fall to the level of my systems that was based on those inputs. Number 20, and this is the last one, which I think is obviously the most important, the best till last, is it is an infinite game. And you need to have a big enough reason and an infinite enough reason to keep growing. What I had to go through quite recently is that I have a short-term goal aligning with a short-term output. So I'm flying my parents out for Christmas. It's this whole thing I keep telling everyone I'm going to do, which I'm still going to follow through on. But I had to understand that as beautiful as that reason is, as beautiful as my values are within that, I had to have an equally amazing and infinite reason to have a why for why I was going to do that. Why was I even flying my parents out in the first place? Why am I building this business to impact as many people as possible? Why am I helping people with their mindset in the first place? Why am I scaling businesses? Well, I had to have an infinite reason to do so. And I think it was a huge mindset shift that I had to go through, that having achieved everything that was well worth it, right? I had to achieve so much to understand that all of that is going to be worth it, but only if I have another big reason to keep going. And that had to be infinite. It would never be a reason that I would end up fulfilling. And a lot of people don't have clarity on their why, but to give clarity to you now would be to say that it's never going to be an end goal. It's going to be along the lines of the infinite game. You have to lean into that. You have to understand the curve is going to keep going up, and you need to have a reason that will never be reached. It will be along the lines of, I want to help people achieve this for as long as I live. And it is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be unclear as fuck, because when it comes down to your why, nobody knows why they're on this earth, and it changes every year, or it changes at many different points in your journey at very least. But for me, having that goal at the end of the year was not going to motivate me. It was, in the grand scheme of things, it was going to help me get to a second part of my journey, or a third or a fourth. But I had to have my why sorted out up here, was that I want to build the best possible life for my family, the generation to come, the generation after that, and everything that I do is for those people. There was nothing about me that had this end goal that was really going to push me forward enough. It had to be in the realm of the infinite game. And for anyone else watching, I'll leave a link down below if you want to explore working with me on fixing your mindset and aligning that vision to perfect inaction, to a second lens, and to get you exactly where you want to go. But that'll be the soft plug over for that one. I'm going to leave that there, but you know exactly the mindset shifts now that have built my journey and my client's journey from A to Z. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with these people, building their identities within the business that determines my and their belief. Once you can understand your belief, you can take risk after risk, you can fail moving fastly, and you can enjoy learning to trust yourself in every point in your journey, because you know exactly how you've shifted yourself from being from a certain identity to the identity that you embody every single day, the one that shows up at the business, the one that shows up on every video that you make. And actually achieving great results is just attached to the needed focus that you have to embody. You have to have the sole focus, you have to have the lack of distraction, and you have to understand bottlenecks within your business. But those take a lot of time to understand, but it only happens through each and every mindset shift that you go along your side of the journey. And now, if you'd like to explore working alongside me on finding those mindset shifts that will allow you to access the vertical, then again, there's a link in the description as well, just to the top line. And I will look forward to seeing if you book in, because it has been a pleasure to shift my own mindset along my entire journey, from working at Five Guys, shaking baskets, getting burns in my arms, to now working with amazing purposeful-based businesses on shifting their mindset and my own. I can tell you for a fact that it is well worth every shift that I've mentioned in this video, every toss, every turn, every vertical, every loss, every attached moment where I felt it was all going to end, and that perfect paralysis that I had sat at that desk before I delivered my mastermind. And now I know that every mindset shift that I've had and that my clients have had has taken me exactly where I want to go. And iterating on that mindset is the most important thing you will ever focus on in your life. And I think it's just that reminder that has helped me so much. So I thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.